Welcome back to the Roundtable. I'm John, NYJohn Hogan, and I'm glad that you're joining us for our second ever episode. Last week we had Toby, Juan, and Perjon and had some great insight prior to the International 3 actually starting, but this week we've already passed the International 3 prelims, and we're going to have an exciting episode for you today that's going to discuss everything from the prelims to bracket predictions that are coming up in the next few days. A big week for Dota. Before we get into things, I'd like to introduce my guest today that we are so happy to have on board. First off, we have the capitalist, Austin Walsh, who is joining us, of course, a very well-known co-commentator, and we're glad to have him here today. How are you doing, Austin? And we also have, we'll go ahead and introduce the second guest before we get into the actual responses. We have Will, El Prez, Kim. So we're going to be able to bring those guys on in a moment, and they're going to be able to provide some insight into actually how the prelims went, because there were a lot of surprises. So guys, you're now on screen. How are you doing? We'll start with the capitalist. How's it going?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm also doing great, but did I hear like a question mark at the end of my name?
We had a little bit of screen difficulties, but we're working past it. We're fine now because you're both on screen. We get to see your nice faces. So let's go ahead and just jump into the action. There's no time to waste, really. We're going to go ahead and look at the actual brackets and how everything worked out for the group stages. We'll look at the chart and take a look at Group A. I mean, on the top of Group A, we're starting with a Western team this year, guys. Na'Vi just dominated the group stage. I mean, of course, Na'Vi are known to play well on the big stage. In the International 1, of course, they were the victors. International 2, they came in second place after a rough start in the prelims. But now in the International 3, there looks to be no fault in their gameplay, only dropping 3 games along the way, a couple to Fnatic and 1 to LGD as well, but still bolstering a really strong record. And the key to their success is different than what it's been in the past. In TI1, we saw Puppy really take over the reins and dominate. In TI2, it was a lot of Dendi on that Rubik, but now we have Havas taking over. How good can Na'Vi be if Havas is as consistent as he was in the prelims? Let's start with the capitalist. What do you think about this?
You know, I think this is a huge step in Na'Vi's growth as a team, that Havos has sort of kept back. The common joke in the scene is that, oh, Havos, what a thrower. You know, he always throws away all of the hard work that Dendi and Puppy and Croaky, that they all provide him. He just throws it all away, and that's the way they lose games. But it isn't as bad as that, but he definitely, you can see a big difference now. He has definitely reined in his over-aggression. And also another thing is that Puppy is now picking heroes to sort of accommodate that aggressiveness coming out of Havos. That the Weaver pickup especially really fits into Havos' styles, and you could tell he is just able to dominate every single game when he has a hero that he's able to get very, very aggressive with and pick up a lot of kills, but also still be able to have that survivability and make sure that he doesn't feed too much. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's both him as a player, you know, really just moving on to the next stage of growth, and also just drafting to accommodate different styles.
Yeah, well, El Prez, I mean, last year we heard Dendi talk in the pre-show. He was talking about how Havas is just the biggest troll in the world, really, and he's a liability often for Na'Vi, and they still managed to succeed. So what does it mean? I mean, the Capitalist touched on it, but how good can they be? Are they TI3 championship caliber if Havas maintains this style?
Well, it's hard to say whether or not they're going to win win the whole thing, just because there are still such stiff competition. We're seeing Fnatic really just bring their A game as well. But for Na'Vi, I completely agree with the Capitalists on the idea that they're really playing to accommodate Havos' more aggressive playstyle, rather than grab strong farmers like the Alchemist, which if they do pick it, it's almost always played by Puppy, or anti-mages. They're going for more aggressive hero-killing style of carries, which you see mostly from the Weaver. Weaver's been seeing a lot of play, and Havos has been making that work. So it's in all honesty, I think it's coming down more to the draft, because Dendi is still playing well, Puppy's still playing well. It's just Havos is no longer throwing. So all of those combined make Na'Vi so much stronger than they used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I was thoroughly impressed with their performance. I was thinking maybe they can drop off a little bit. Some of these games, they might get the close ones fall away from them, but we really saw them perform well throughout the prelims, so I'm overall impressed. Let's go ahead and move on to the next team that we want to talk about. Looking down the brackets again, we see DK comes in second in Group A. So a lot of people have been trashing the Chinese Dota, saying that they've really fallen off, but they really haven't fallen that far. They're still making their way to the upper brackets, the winner brackets, and they're still going to have a fighting chance to come in here and take home the title. DK are a team that has been consistent throughout the years, and of course, they've been playing well in this tournament as well. What are your impressions, El Prez, on DK at a glance?
Well, there was this great infographic that showed that DK as a team has the highest combined GPM, and I think that's really what comes down to the Chinese strength. It's really that their execution is very solid. I think the problem that they came going into this tournament is similar to the G1 League where Alliance swept as well. They just haven't gotten as much practice against the Western teams as they would like, while the Western teams are doing a lot more to study their Eastern counterparts. So I think that really shows with the fact that Alliance is undefeated. DK is still doing strong. Like, Chinese execution isn't that easy to beat, even if you know what's coming up. So, all of that combined, I still think they're doing quite well.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I mean, looking at DK's track record actually in the games, they dropped 2 to Na'Vi. So 2 big wins for Na'Vi, because in the past, these teams have gone back and forth, of course. Whenever Na'Vi used to go overseas in Dota All-Stars, they would lose most of those competitions to DK because they were so strong in that game. But what do you think the capitalists about, or capitalists, I don't know why I added the thought in, but what do you think about their performance here? Maybe some of these losses they picked up along the way. I think they dropped 2 to Na'Vi, split with Fnatic. So, I mean, in general, does DK have championship potential? And I think this is a recurring theme we're going to have. Can these teams do well in the upper brackets? Can they make it to the finals? Or will we see them slip up along the way? We know that they have Burning, of course, one of the best carries in the world. And we have a clip in store, actually, we might go to in a moment, where we see Zenith kind of lost track of the fact that they do have Burning, which is obviously a devastating mistake if you do that against them, because he will come back to beat you in the end. And the clip is on board now. I mean, just watch this team fight evolve. You can see that all of a sudden they're starting off the team fight, and then out of nowhere, they're just focusing the wrong targets. They're going for the supports. They're going for X, QQQ. And in the back, we see just Burning slip away and start to clean up, which is exactly what you want to do as a hard carry. He did not die once in this game against Zenith, where Zenith had an 11-1 lead early on here. And if Burning doesn't die, DK are going to win a lot of games.
Yeah, you know, honestly, it's a little bit surprising to me that DK is the front runner when it comes to the Asian scene. Honestly, I was not expecting them to be the high team, but it's no surprise that they are in the top 4 of their group. That was always to be expected. You know, DK, IG, and LGD were the big 3 teams that were really expected to see high up there in the international. And honestly, I think it comes down to the fact that a lot of the problem is that the Eastern scene has not been able to get as much practice as the Western scene. It used to be, you know, TI1, we had the Eastern scene completely unprepared for the international. We had TI2, where the Western scene was the one who was really unprepared for all the heat that the Eastern scene was going to be bringing. They were practicing every single day, boot camping like crazy, and just the Western teams got, you know, blown out of the water for the most part. And now TI3, now we're on even playing field. And honestly, the group stage was just a toss-up. You look at the group stage, you look at the top 4, the top 5 of each group, any one of those teams can make it all the way. And I think that, honestly, you know, I think people who are criticizing the Eastern scene and saying, you know, they've really slipped up, this is going to be Western dominated scene. There's no way. I mean, any one of those teams can make it. It's just now we're on a very, very even playing field, and it just takes one bad game from Alliance, and next thing you know, they're going to be out of the international. You know, it's just, honestly, it's going to be a very exciting international to watch. And DK specifically, I think they have a really good shot. Burning is just such a good captain. It's what makes him such a good player. It's not only is he a really good technical carry player, but also as a captain, it's so rare to have your carry player be the captain and having so much input into the draft and in the in-game calls. It really goes to show what just a god that he is in the Dota scene, just being able to perform those multiple roles. And he's surrounded himself with some really good players. He's really made the right ideas when the players that he's picked up, they accommodate really well to his specific style.
Yeah, I think you bring a really good point up too, because Super forever has been the most underrated solo player in Asia. I mean, he did not even make it into the 1v1 competition, which I know a lot of people are going to be like, of course, some of the other players deserve spots, but throughout the last year, Super's played better than Zhao 8. There's no question in my mind, and I think he really deserved that spot. Perhaps you could also say Fada, maybe he could have been passed by Super, but Super is really proving his worth too. And if you have those 2 players that play so well together, we know that they can go really far. It's like S4 and Loda right now for Alliance. It's that dynamic duo that's just creating so many opportunities for them. And of course, adding on to that, 2 of the most renowned players in the world, X and QQQ, on supports. I mean, from eHome 2010, these are some of the best players in the history of Dota that they've accumulated on this squad. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw DK go far and maybe have a shot at the title. Let's keep working through the groups, though. Of course, DK, not a big surprise that they were up that high. But looking next, there is a big surprise. Fnatic at 9-5 out of the group stages. Nobody saw this coming. A lot of people said Fnatic can do well on LAN. But think about their victories. They 2-0'd a Na'Vi, who are at the top of their group. They split with DK, I believe, 1-1. I mean, they've looked like a whole different team right now in the International 3 than they looked prior to this, especially considering in DreamHack they lost out of the group stages. So what do you guys think about Fnatic? How real are they? Are they an actual threat in the winners bracket, or are they going to make their way down sooner or later to losers and have to fight their way through those monsters that are sitting down there waiting to eat up whatever competition they can find? We'll start with El Prez. What are your impressions of Fnatic overall?
Well, if you had to tell me before if I thought Fnatic was going to be top in the group, I actually thought it was going to be MOUZ over Fnatic, so I'm actually completely shocked that Fnatic made it. Honestly, though, they've just been playing so well recently, and it's hard to say whether or not they're going to make it all the way. 9-5 is still great, right? That's still third in their group. But it seemed like they lost a lot of their steam on day 2 compared to what they had on day 1. Day 1, they definitely finished and felt a little bit stronger. Not to say that they weren't strong on day 2. They still were. But it's hard to say whether or not they're going to make it all the way. I do think that they stand a very good chance, as does everyone else in the winners bracket section. But it's hard to say. I can't even... who is Fnatic even playing in first?
Well, we'll take a look at the brackets later, so we can definitely get to that point. But I think you're right. It's hard to tell because we've seen them match up against some good competition like Na'Vi and take them out. And then I believe along the way they dropped 2 games to LGD. They dropped some other games, of course, to accumulate their 5 losses. So their results have been a little bit sporadic as well because, of course, it's different facing off against Western teams and Eastern teams. It's just a different breed of Dota. I mean, we've seen the variations between the two strategies come out in full force throughout the entirety of the group stages so far. So we have to take that into consideration as well. Fnatic are a team that don't have as much experience against the Asian Dota teams. Meanwhile, Na'Vi and Alliance do have a lot. So when we come back, let's go ahead and talk about LGD, one of the other Chinese teams that perhaps a little bit surprising because a lot of people had predicted them to make it to the finals. But first, we'll go to break. So be sure to stick with us and come back and listen to the discussions about the rest of the teams. We still have plenty more to recap about the International 3, including predictions for the brackets once we get later in the show. So be ready to listen and stick with us after the break.